Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Business Spotlight. I am Scott McMeans with Action Coach SBL, and I am honored today to have Mr. Lenny Berry of OCHBS with us today. He's going to talk about his business, what makes him successful, and the kind of things he looks for when he's looking to grow his business and partner with the right kind of people. So, with that in mind, Lenny, welcome to the show. Give yourself
Thank you.
a round of applause if you would, and introduce yourself to the audience. Let them know who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, first of all, Scott, thank you. Chance of meeting you at a networking event of all places, and we're collaborating here. Appreciate the opportunity. Lenny Berry, born and raised here, right here in Cleveland, Ohio. Grew up off of Miles Avenue in Garfield Heights, and went to school with John Marshall. Graduated from Cleveland State University, and I was a DJ. So I'm air personality here for 13 years. I was on two radio stations. 93 FM, which is where it all started for me, and WENZ, which bought 93 FM or WZAK at the time. Was in the music industry and still am. Been doing that for 30 plus years. Had two medical
Wow.
clinics here, helping patients, get access to cannabis, and also doing cannabis education. So that's where OCH stems from. So that's Ohio Cannabis Health and Business Summit.
Ohio Cannabis Health and Business Summit.
Correct.
Outstanding. So when you're looking at your business, obviously there's a lot of intrigue, I would imagine. There's a lot of interest, and I would assume a lot of confusion with what it is that you do because cannabis is involved. So walk me through a little bit about how you set up the business and what do you look to achieve with OCHBS.
Well, yeah, sure. Initially, the business came from my cannabis company, where we were doing recommendations for patients. So this was around 2017. So we were seeing patients who qualified, by the state standards to use cannabis for alternative method of medication. So I had my first conference in 2019 because I was getting feedback from patients that it just wasn't enough education from them, or for them, I should say, after they left the clinic and received the medicine from the dispensaries. Most patients didn't know what to do, didn't know how to dose, didn't know, what the adverse effects were, and if there were any, how they could counteract them, things of that sort. So my first conference was strictly a patient conference where we had physicians, processors and people who were making the products or business owners from that side of the field come in and discuss the products they were making and putting on the market for the patients to use. We also had vendors at that particular event where there were more ancillary businesses because it was new, right? So you had
Mhm.
a lot of people doing aromatherapy candles or T-shirts. Some, companies here locally were there, like Rise Dispensary. We had Terrasana. At that time, Herbology was a new dispensary. So things that of that nature, and a lot of CBD companies too. So 600 people was our attendance for that particular event, and pretty grandiose event for that time in the hotel. So we rented out the whole hotel and had a very successful event. So at that point, that's what caught the eye of the IX Center. I was already kind of working with them with some charity events there, and ironically, they asked me what else was I doing, and I told them that because the first event I didn't put my name on it. Nobody knew it was me. I kind of stayed behind the scenes on purpose because I didn't want it to be, any interference for people to attend, right? So whether
Right.
it was, hey, the guy's too young, he shouldn't know anything about cannabis, black, white, I didn't want any of that to be a hindrance of a reason why you
Hmm.
did not show up. So, and I think it was very successful, in my opinion. We had a 98% positive feedback from all the attendees on the event. So at that time, it was called Ohio Cannabis Health Summit. And the feedback that I received was that 98% of the people that actually participated in the surveys wanted to know about the business aspect. So I rebranded to Ohio Cannabis Health and Business Summit. So our second our second outing was going to happen during COVID. We shut down for 2 years, and in 2022 was our second event, which should have been our fourth, but that was the first real big event at the IX Center. That particular event, we had 1,800 people. We did about I want to say it was 50 speakers at that one, and we had 100 vendors. Last October, we had 4,000 people. We had 100 speakers and 122 exhibitors. So it's growing exponentially. I think a lot of it has to do with the curiosity now that we're the 24th legal state in the country, to legalize cannabis. So now everybody's eyes are open, like, hey, is it money in this? I can now be a patient without having to register, in the
Mm,
system. So people don't necessarily have to know that I'm using cannabis to, treat a condition. So to answer your second part of your question, the why, or the reason why I'm here is in my opinion, is about patient education. You
mm,
know, there's money to be made in the business, but I also want to bring the plant to the forefront, and alleviate the stigma behind it. So there's a lot of bullying that goes on in this, as you could imagine. So if I met you and you said, "Hey, man, are you smoking weed? Are you doing any type of alternative medicine?" So even with psilocybin, mushrooms now is a big thing too. Back in the day, people would say, "Oh man, he's just he's a stoner, he's a drug
right.
addict, or, that kind of thing." So, but not knowing, there are people who are using this plant for medicinal purposes of PTSD or cancer. So when you really find out, even myself, I've never been a person who was, mad about anybody smoking weed, because I had clients like Snoop or Wiz Khalifa who smoked all day, every day, right? So I've been around it for a long time. But what I found out too was, I own property here and I have tenants that were smoking. So after I started educating myself and understood what it was, I would ask my tenants, are you smoking it, recreationally? Or are you smoking it for a reason? And majority of those tenants had epilepsy. So,
Really?
yeah, and they were working through their condition using cannabis, instead of using, Keppra or any of these hardcore
Yeah.
pharmaceutical drugs with side effects.
It's
So that
interesting.
was in a nutshell.
No, Lenny, you bring up a conversation point that I think most people, I don't think, know enough about this situation because of what they all have been taught and or supposedly educated about prior to cannabis being legalized for a variety of reasons. And I think the stigma, as you kind of alluded to, has always been, oh, you're a stoner. But what we're discovering is it's a much better um, solution to people's PTSD or pain for a variety of ailments without the side effects. The biggest
Sure.
side effect, I would imagine, Lenny, would be the stigma of you being a user of this plant as opposed to understanding why somebody uses this plant, right?
Yes, I was on I won't mention any names, but I was on a show. This was my second year, and they were interviewing me. And before I could even get on the air, I had a gentleman. He was just going in on me. You're a snake oil salesman. You're selling a false
Okay.
hope to people, and I mean, he was bashing me to the point where I was like, man, do I even need to go, sit down and have this interview? But
Yeah.
you know, doing all of that, the host of the show, he was very kind, and he wanted to stop the gentleman. And I said, no, just let him go. But let's do it on the air. Let's not do it off the air. And the reason being is, this is the reason why I'm here, right?
Hmm.
I want to have this particular conference because of people like this gentleman. So when we get on the air, I could tell he had some ailments, and I said, well, sir, with all due respect, what are you actually medicating? Since you just I want to get into that topic because that's what I feel that the plant is doing for people. And then also too, we're going to get a piece of paper and I want you to tell me where you're buying your medicine at, right? So he said,
Hmm.
okay, my doctor is such and such, and I'm getting my medicine from Drug Mart. And here are a couple of different things that I'm taking. And I said, well, we only need five, right? I don't need you to write down this whole big old list. And,
Yeah.
kind of just tell me what kind of side effects you're having from any of the medicine. And so one in particular, he had some issue with his liver, right? Because for whatever reason, he had an adverse effect to that. And he said
Okay.
he also he found some blood in his liver, so they had to change up his regimen or whatever. And I said, well, are you still taking the medicine? And he said, yeah. So I said, oh, okay. So you had a severe reaction to this medication.
And you're still
Um,
taking it.
you're still taking it. So I said, why? And he said, well, they changed it up, they got it right, and I'm okay. So I said, okay, so now we're going to go back into you bashing me before we got on the air about cannabis and the people that take it are drug addicts and the typical stuff. And so
Hmm.
I said, well, sir, you're buying your medicine from where? And he said, Drug Mart, like I told you. And I said, so are you using a drug or are you using medication? And his eyes just looked like, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're buying your medicine from Drug Mart. So is it a drug or is it a medicine? So he said, well, it's both. So I said, well, you just bash cannabis is only one sided, right? It's a drug to
Hmm.
you, but it's not medicine to anybody else. So I said, I could take this two ways for you. They told you what it is on the name of the sign when you walked in the door, right? It's a drug. It's a pharmaceutical drug. So
Yep.
I'm not calling you a drug addict because you're using something that was made in a lab versus something that was made from the earth. So we're not going to
Hmm.
bash each other, right? But that's where the stigma comes into play. And I'm just saying this to you because I just want you to open your eyes to the
Yeah.
conversation when somebody tells you, I'm using this because it helps me medically, right? It's one thing if some guy just came in and he was, you know, high as the moon and I'm not using it to treat anything. Okay, well, cool. But I still don't bash that either because I could be drunk and walked into a place and people would just be like, oh man,
Hmm.
poor Lynn was down on his luck, or he had, I don't know, somebody go talk to him, but now he's high. Well, oh, it's not the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Definitely a
so
stigma there.
yeah, so
I.
so that's kind of where it all kind of really hit home for me. And I said, having this at the IX Center was a big deal for me for one reason. It brought it to the forefront of a mainstream venue,
Yeah.
right? That no one would have ever thought this was going to be there with an auto show, home and garden show, right?
Yeah.
And it gives you people who are normally coming to these events a safe place to educate themselves, right? So now this is a venue that everybody loves. I can feel secure knowing that they're not going to let anybody just in here producing any old type of show educate me.
Yeah.
So
That's a good piece. When is the 2024 show happening? Do you have that date already finalized?
yes, October 4th and 5th. We will be at the IX Center once again. Times will be 10 to 5 p.m. on both days.
Yeah, I will
Unless,
make sure. I was just I'll
okay,
make sure I communicate that in the description and information down below because I think it's worthwhile for
okay,
people to be a part of the educational part of what you're trying to do. For me, I know enough to be absolutely dangerous, right? But I also understand um, if it gives you the relief you're looking for and no other side effect, why would it be a challenge for somebody to accept that that is a reasonable medication for somebody to take? Seems pretty straightforward. Question I have, Lenny, when it comes to what you do, is it more the educational side or is it more the business side as far as when people interact with you and what they're looking for when they engage with your services? Are they asking more about education, meaning I want to learn about the plant, I want to learn about what it does as a medicine, or is it they want to learn more about how to run a business within this space. Where do you spend a majority of your time?
I would say it's 50-50, it's straight down the middle.
Really? Okay.
And the reason I say that is because you can't run a business without understanding what you're actually selling, right? Or working
Solid
towards.
point.
So I tell
Hmm.
people all the time that, you can't get in this industry just to make money off of somebody and not be able to help them. And that's the real importance of getting in the cannabis. It's a culture of helping people. So yeah, you have a lot of big MSOs who, probably could care less about that, right? It's all about the bottom line. But from my perspective on the I guess the lower tier is where I consider myself, because I'm not a multi-million-dollar company or anything like that. But I'm here to serve both sides. You have to educate the consumers on what they're using, how they're using it, and you have to educate the people who are behind the scenes making the medicine for the patients too. So you have a situation now in Ohio where it's legal to anybody that's 21 and over. There's no place where you can buy it currently at the moment, but you will be able to. So we have about 185,000 patients medically that have recommendations from a physician to use cannabis in the state. Now it's going to go to a couple hundred million, I mean, a couple million people. And
Yeah.
those million new people are all patients to me, whether you are using it recreationally or whether you're going to use it medicinally. Um, and when you talk about the business, the conference is both, so that's
Mhm.
why it's health and business. Most people don't want to mix the two together, and it's hard to try to do that because most business people don't care about the patient side of it, right? I just want to go in, learn how to get my SOPs together for my business so I can train my employees, educate the
Yeah.
staff and make it, right? Well, you can't educate your staff enough, because now I'm a patient, I'm coming in from a medical situation and I need to know what's the best strain that's going to help my PTSD or cancer or, sickle cell. If I'm not an educated, you know, employee, I can't tell this patient the right thing to help them. So
Yeah.
that's why I try to mix them together. And a lot of people, thought it was going to be a hard sell for business people to attend the conference. But so far it has not. It has been a great mixture of both business and consumers there.
I love that. The there's a phrase that we use in Action Coach all the time, and that is an educated customer is the best customer. And the reason we say that is it's hard to get people to understand what you want them to do unless they're fully educated on the process, the outcomes, and the strategies and action steps to get there. So you need to educate people on how to do certain things. And when you educate them, as you make comment, not everybody knows about cannabis. So in order to have a support system in your store, you need to be able to educate. You need those people educated so they can educate the consumer so they're making the right purchase. There's this really nice trickle down effect of education is key no matter what business you're in. And it seems like that's what I'm pulling out of you is education is a big part of what you do. And because of that,
Absolutely.
it allows the people you work with to be that much more comfortable going forward because they're educated. And that's what
Mhm.
makes the connection or the alignment when you're working between the education side of your business and the business side of your business is it's all founded on everybody needs to know what's going on, right? I
I
think
agree.
that's a big part
Yes.
of it. Yeah. So when you have 4,000 people come through in 2023, what's the expectation for 2024?
I was actually hoping for a little more than 4,000. Not
Yeah.
that I'm happy with that, only just because there was such a huge movement with issue two passing. I knew it was going to be a significant jump from the year prior, just because now it's coming to the forefront as something that people can understand, and not be afraid of, right? Because before it was taboo, now the news is not afraid necessarily to talk about it more because it's on the ballot. So consumers
Yeah.
have to understand what that meant. So that's why I was excited to see that many people there because I think they just wanted to really know what the industry was about. So are we
Yeah.
going to be okay just because now we should just not really care about cannabis because it's 2024? you guys are making a big deal about something that, nobody's really died from or got high and, did some crazy
Mhm.
things like drunk drivers or something like that, right? But when I was on
Yeah.
NPR, when people started interviewing me about that and the kids' child safety scenario, and I said, I think it's more on the parents' neglect, right? Because you can have a gun in the house and nobody's really saying anything about, okay, this person bought a gun and could, somebody could get angry and kill the whole household or the neighborhood or anything, right? But
Yeah.
it's about gun safety. It should be in a locker, it should be locked up, it should be hidden away from the kids. Okay, cannabis, if you guys have a big fear about that, is the same scenario, right? Nobody's saying that about alcohol. You got a bar at the house. It's alcohol sitting out on the shelf and the kids can drink that any time, right? But
Yeah.
it's about how you keep that safe and away from your underage kids, that you would navigate that. So I was just saying that it's just common sense, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
going to buy medicine, whether if I had Vicodin at the house or Percocet, which could do damage too, you keep it in a medicine cabinet or you keep it up high on the shelf someplace that your child couldn't get to it. But also too, when it comes to the community, being afraid of having a dispensary in their neighborhood, I refer back to the pharmaceutical drugs. It's no different, right? Except for now, you have a secure. It's like going into a bank vault when you go into a dispensary, right?
Right.
Most
It's
of the
all,
time, there's security
yeah.
there. You can't get buzzed in. There's a man trap. There's a whole lot of precautions being taken. So, and then you have to have a recommendation to get it, and you're on camera with the state 24 hours a day. So,
No.
what are you afraid of?
Well, stigma. It seems like people would be afraid of the
You
stigma.
There you go.
So when it comes to issue two, what is the quick assessment or the quick description you would provide the audience about what issue two really was?
Oh, man, I had to take a
Can
deep
you
breath.
do it in 20 seconds or less? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think issue two was, yeah, really just about the voice of the people, right? We all voted as Ohioans, and the majority of the people said, hey, we want this for patients in the state, right? They saw the home grow, they saw the social equity, they saw where the tax dollars were going to, and they broke it all down. And now the
Mhm.
government wants to come in and put their hands in it, right? And I always say it's all about the, so the tax dollars was the main thing about all of this. Who's going to get the money from the sales, right?
Okay, I was going to say people wanted the state to be able to receive the tax dollars, so there's a justification for doing for having cannabis be legal, correct?
Correct, correct. But you
Yeah.
you have cigarettes. They have what the sin tax on that. They have
Mhm.
alcohol, which I don't think really has an excise tax, but I'm not 100% sure. But you want to overtax the cannabis. Why? Are the pharmaceutical drug companies paying a extra tax for that? I mean, it's far
Yeah.
more money there, right, than it is with a cannabis program. So if you're really hungry for the tax dollars, why not tax the bigger industry if that's really what you need, right?
It would make
But
sense. Yeah.
yeah, but they know it's going to pass back on to the patients, right? Because the companies aren't going to absorb that and say, okay, well, fine, I'm going to take this, $100 million hit a year. No, I'm going to figure out a way to raise the money on the particular drugs or medication that I'm giving away, and the consumer's going to absorb that. So there's no insurance for cannabis, so people have to come out of pocket for that, right? Meaning, so the cannabis companies have to take the hit on the taxes. They're probably going to pass that back on to the consumers too. So why stigmatize that business as well? Why not let it function like a regular business, right? People are using it. I mean, if you want to say from a recreational standpoint, great. People are drinking alcohol too. There's no medical benefit that I know from drinking a bottle of E&J or Hennessy or Cavassier. So that's where the whole, I
Solid
guess,
point. Solid
yeah,
point.
that's the whole irritation behind all of this. So the government comes in, hey, we don't think social equity is a thing. It's against the Constitution. It shouldn't be, you know, you know, licenses given to one minority group over another. Oh, okay, fine. We're going to strip that out, right? And then we're going to take the tax dollars that were supposed to go to social equity and build more jails, and also use that for police training. We're trying to get away from that, right? That was the whole point of passing the bill to legalize it in the first place. So the people in the state are telling you they're tired of you spending your time on that. Put the money
Right.
towards something that we all could benefit from. Build some more bridges, help the roads out, child education, whatever you want to do. But
Yeah.
for the love of God, why are you going to build more jails?
Yeah,
So
instead of building more jails, why don't we set up the law enforcement so they can do the best job possible to defend laws? And this is not something that we should be worried about because it's been legalized. Let's move forward and make sure that people aren't doing stupid things anymore. Let's make sure that
yeah,
we're
I mean,
focused on the right things.
when you say, hey, we're going to take this and utilize this money to do police education about specifically cannabis in general, right? Now you're alienating one thing, like you just said you didn't want social equity for. Or, I agree. Take the money and educate the police officer as a whole, so they could be
Yeah.
better servants for the community. I mean
And
that
that's a better use of tax dollars than trying to recreate a wheel that doesn't need. My point on this is it's an interesting topic, but in all things considered, it's medicine, and we're trying to over-regulate it to the point where we just made it legal, but it's not necessarily legal anymore. They've put in a different caveat to it. It doesn't make any sense.
there you go.
Lenny, we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you a couple things about how you run your business and how you run both the educational side from the business perspective and educating your customers or your patients on what goes on. If there was
Well,
one thing that you wanted to get across as far as a message to the audience, what would that message be? And it could be twofold, one for the business side, one for the education side. I'm just curious, how would we best promote OCHBS?
well, I would say I would want them to have confidence in knowing that what
Mm,
I'm producing for them is a vetted program, right? I'm not putting people up there to speak or sell things at this place that I think would be harmful or detrimental to their success or medical side. The people that I'm screening for the conference, I think bring value. They bring information that you could use.
mhm.
So, when you watch an infomercial, most of the time you get a little tidbit or something, and then they sell you on the back end. That's not me. So the conference is a reasonably priced event. It's $25 for one day and $50 for the 2 days, but early bird specials are 2040. So when you go to most big conferences, I'm sure you've been to, quite a few,
Mhm.
it could be a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. But I think there is an issue when it comes to education, period. Right. So you have gatekeepers, if you will, who want a certain type of people to understand what it is, because I'm going to keep out a certain aspect of who I want to be educated. So if I can't afford to pay $1,000 to go to a conference, maybe I can get a pass for $100 and walk the showroom floor to buy some products. I'm not learning about the industry, nor am I learning about
Yeah.
anything to help me medically either. So everything that I'm producing at the IX Center is all inclusive. You could do all of it, or you could do as little as you want. So I try to make it a community place of openness too. So you don't have to feel afraid about coming out and saying that you need help, or coming out seeking information about any aspect of this. I try to have it all there for you under one roof for one price. So I'm not going to a la carte anything to you and sell you a piece of this and a piece of that. Just come out and learn. Come out and meet the great people in the industry here that I feel are worthy of your time and your effort to get there.
Love it. I couldn't have asked for a better commercial, a better way to finish that off. That was great. I will have all the information down so everybody that's watching the video will get a chance to see in the description down below the dates and information and so on and so forth. So Lenny, this has been spirited, it's been educational, and I'm happy that we have the chance to speak together because this is an interesting topic. And I think people are going to be very intrigued to the point. You're going to meet a number of people in October. I'm pretty certain it's going to be more than 4,000.
I hope so. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Well, thanks for being here, and we will see everybody again on the next episode of the Business Spotlight. Take care, guys.